Hello, Goddess. Welcome to Junos in Shadow, a podcast and community for moms to explore various mainstream, holistic, and esoteric methodologies. Here, we dig deeper, get out of the shadows, and empower the loving warrior goddess inside to shine our light bright. Welcome back, Junos. This episode, we talk self-compassion, giving ourselves the space to really sit with and feel our emotions without judgment or criticism so we can process and let it go. With everything going on right now, we all could really use a bit more. The juggling and struggling with chaos and uncertainty has touched every facet of our lives. Co-parenting, schooling, the trips to the grocery store, gas station, park, library, walks with your dog. Almost everything now has 1,000 strings and a mask attached to it. Yes, I have a roof over my head, food for my family, some of which I even grow myself, a wonderful and supportive partner, healthy and energetic kids, the most charming, laid-back, and lazy puppy that someone with a 4, 5, and 6-year-old could ask for. I even have a podcast that I am so passionate about and have been pouring my heart into. I go to bed every night incredibly thankful for all that I have and have worked for. But if I'm being honest, before I get to thankful, I am tired, depleted, and worrisome. I even fall into the trap of stop being a whiner, stop complaining. So many others have it much worse than you do, right? I'm sure it sounds familiar. It's really time to flip the script on that. We are all tired, exhausted, stressed, but you know what else we're doing? The best that we fucking can, despite whatever shit show is going on in the world around us. Could things be worse? Sure. But it is also okay to not be okay with how things are. It is okay to feel whatever it is you're feeling. Be frustrated, be heartbroken, be angry, be sad. Be whatever you need to be. Sometimes you have to feel it before you can really let it go. Alona Pamplona is a self-compassion and clarity coach. She guides you through the process of being loving with yourself while encountering the pain, setbacks, and limitations of life. No more shoving it down and then criticizing yourself when it bubbles back up. It's time to get real, let it out, and most importantly, heal. We also discuss language and digging into not just how we speak to ourselves, but the words we use in our lives or with others when bringing our thoughts and intentions into the universe. Buckle up and enjoy the ride, Junos. Welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for being a part of this, especially because I've personally, ever since I've been listening to your readings, I was like, oh my goodness. And then I found out more about what you do and how you're a word nerd.
I love words.
I was like, I have to reach out. But now that I'm done fangirling, why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself, what you do, and who you serve?
Awesome. So I'm Ilona Pamplona. Currently, my website says that I'm a self-compassion coach, but I'm right now in the process of moving into an astrology coach. And really, the reason I do that is because I really do understand how astrology is like the psychology of our ancestors, and coaching to me is the action support, the support for action. And so, but I also like kind of like how we're both discovering astrology and knowing ourselves. I also feel that astrology is almost also the access to the self-compassion that sometimes we don't give ourselves. So I'm going to be using astrology kind of as a compass, a guide to get my clients to where they need to be. And so my clients tend to be Gen X and millennials who know that they have a gift, know that they have a purpose, but they just haven't gotten there. So they probably have a great job and they probably have traveled the world and they've done what all of us think are all the things we're supposed to do, but there's still something missing in them. And so I want to use astrology and coaching as a discovery experience and then an activation to their true purpose.
Beautiful. What made you decide to start doing with that, with the self-compassion? How'd the base start? What brought you to that, your aha moment?
So I actually have a master's in health and wellness coaching, and the master's concentration that I did was a very long one. It was integrative wellness practices, which I joke is a fancy way of saying mindfulness. And in that process, we learned a lot of research-based theories and understandings on mindfulness and meditation and things that kind of support well-being outside of like the allopathic nutrition and health and exercise. And I came into the research of a woman named Kristen Neff, who created a scientific, like a research-based framework for self-compassion. And to me, that really, like, it hit me. Like, I remember when I started learning about this, like, I felt like my heart was exploding, and I'm like, wow, like this is what's missing in the lives of the people that I've worked with, like in card readings and in workspaces before. Because what I did, because the word nerd I am, I looked up the word compassion. When we look at compassion, a lot of people tell me, oh, it's self-love, it's self-care, but compassion is actually Latin for compassione, which means to suffer with. And so when we're compassionate with someone, we're actually holding the space for them to go through the shadows, like the shadow side of their life, to come to the light. And self-compassion is having that space for ourselves, right? Like, how many times have you actually given yourself the space to not be okay, to suffer, to not feel well? Most of the time we're trying to bypass and be like, oh, I just got to tough it out, or I've got to do something else, or like we're always trying to not witness the suffering. And when we don't witness the suffering, we actually amplify it because it just keeps on repeating until we witness it. And so for me, that was like, for me, I was like, oh my God, yes, we have to sit in suffering to heal. And so I was like, this is going to be part of my jam.
No, I love that. That's really beautiful. And I mean, it even resonated with me in this very moment because it's first day of my cycle and it's a rough one. And I've recently made the mindset shift of not working through it, like taking it as my me time. And I've noticed that when I've decided to like just say, okay, you know what? It's my time. That means it's my time to chill. I don't have to take all this medication and make myself feel better so I can just power through it. No, I'm going to relax and watch some TV. And it doesn't always, but I do feel like since that mindset has happened, it's also because I'm giving myself that love. It boosted me in so many different ways that I hadn't even thought that it was going to. Just saying, like, you know what? First 2 days are always rough. So these are going to be my chill days.
Yeah.
Everybody needs them.
Yeah.
I'm not really good at them.
Like, and permission, like it also gives us permission to feel our feels. It gives us permission to not feel great. Like, I'm not saying that, some people might misconstrue it and say, okay, like, you're letting people just feel bad, and we don't want to stay in the state of not
No.
feeling, but we need to be okay with feeling not great sometimes. Like, it's
Mm-hmm.
actually a human experience.
Yes, it's pain is part of life, and it's really part of the appreciation cycle, I feel like.
Exactly. Yes.
And you personally, what do you like to do to help embrace your inner goddess when you're ready to say, all right, like if you're taking your 2 chill days, what are some like rituals or things that you enjoy?
Well, I have a Taurus moon, so senses, like the senses are really important to me. So, you know, I I notice that when I really want to elevate my frequency, I do connect with things that make me feel elevated. So, essential oils have always been part of my jam. Like, I do have like an oil ritual, like oils that uplift me or oils that kind of calm me down or oils that make me feel protected. So I do have like, these experiences where I kind of really connect with the senses. For me, it's also very important to chill because when we think about masculine, feminine energy. So when you're saying goddess, you think of feminine energy, and feminine energy is flow and being in flow state rather than action. So kind of like allowing myself to be guided, like asking myself at the start of those kind of days and being like, where am I being called to go? Who am I being called to connect with? What am I being called to say? And just really allowing my intuition to guide me rather than a checklist. Like we were talking before this all started, like, there are days where you need a checklist and there are days where you get to say, I'm going to intuitively go where I'm guided.
Or like the only thing, like, I saw that meme with like the toad, and he gets up and he's like, looks at his little checklist, and all it says is wake up. And he goes, well, looks like I'm done for the day.
Yes.
And with your clients, I'm sure some of them are bound to be Junos. That's what I call my listeners, us moms. What's the most common thing that you tend to treat or work with your Junos?
Okay, so the first thing that comes to my mind is feeling stuck or feeling like they're not embodying their purpose, right? Like the sense of like I'm not where I need to be, right? So kind of like embracing the present and then getting clear on what's next. I also, some of my Junos also integration. A lot of them have some kind of spiritual or non, corporate gift that they don't feel comfortable integrating into their work or how they express themselves or how they show up on social media. So, getting them aware of why they're not comfortable with integrating these magical, authentic gifts that they have. Yeah, I would say those are two of the big ones. I also think there's a vulnerability piece. I have some, very go-getters that haven't allowed their feelings to come through fully, and so we get to be vulnerable in some of our sessions.
I can definitely understand that, because I've had probably 3 readings over the last couple of days where I'm like telling you, get out of the air. And in those like 5 seconds after the silence, what do you hear?
I've had so many people cry, like legit, like people.
Yeah, because it's just, it's like, oh my gosh, busy, 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 doing, doing, doing. And of course, you're like thinking about yourself and usually doing like those bare necessities, like eating, doing, but it's like, what do I want? What do I feel? How do I really feel? Sit with your emotion. So I've been telling a lot of people about that as well. Like, sit with yourself in the quiet, like you're waiting for a stranger to say something.
Yeah, and it's interesting because when I think about coaching, so people don't always understand the distinction of what a coach is versus like a consultant or a therapist is. And coaching is giving someone the space to, we reflect, we mirror, and we ask questions. We don't say, oh, you should do this. We say, I'm hearing this. I'm seeing this. It feels like this. And we really reflect what a client is saying to us. And then it's in those moments that a client actually says, oh my God, I said that 5 times in a session. Or, oh my gosh, this is what I'm reflecting to the world. And they really get to see themselves for
Hmm.
who they are and really integrate that. So for me, like integration is probably a word that's going to come up a lot.
No, I do think it's very key when we are talking about bringing light to those shadows and doing like getting into that deeper work. Because when it comes to shadows, it's also sitting there saying, like, who am I?
Yeah. Yeah.
Or maybe like, who was that? Like, sometimes you might do something and it's a little bit unrecognizable, and that's like your holy shit moment. Like, this person's inside of me. And
Yes.
it's like we were talking about earlier, knock on the door, say hello, see who they are. Might be
Exactly.
interesting.
Yeah. It might be a lot more interesting than you thought.
Yeah. And what do you think is what's your favorite way or recommendation to maybe help bring light to those shadows, or do a little bit of digging for ourselves to find some of that?
That's a great question. So for me as a coach, I think that coaching process is like a way to go through it, right? So whether it's a reading, because I think for some people, some readers actually guide the reading in a coaching way, or having coaching modalities. Why? Because the process requires you to look at the situation, right? Just look at it. Because like I said before, coaching isn't about like, oh, well, you have a problem, this is the things that you should be doing, or you have this goal and this is what I think you should do. Coaching and these healing modalities are an opportunity to build awareness, say, okay, oh my gosh, this is where my shadow work needs to happen, right? So there's actually a whole methodology made in the 80s about behavior change, right? And so when you're talking about helping someone, what's the best way to help someone to get from the darkness to the light? You have to understand where in the model of behavior change there are, and then get them to the different phrases. So like a reading, a healing experience, these types of conversations create the awareness where they go, oh my gosh, I need to do something. And then the coaching gets you through the work. It gets you to say, well, what should I do? And you get to practice and you get to try new things and you get to get into action until you've now created a new way of being that you can maintain, that is the way that you want it to be. So going from the dark to the light requires a whole spectrum of experiences.
No, it really does. And I do like that. And sometimes it is the whole process. And sometimes for me, it's also just like peeking in the door.
Mm.
Maybe sitting with that ickiness for a little bit. Like, I'm not saying wallow, but of course it's great to do the coaching and do the work. But sometimes I like to, I don't know, like let myself feel icky, like, or
Yes.
I have a 4, 5, and 6-year-old, so I practice this a lot. Like, you're allowed to feel how you feel. And maybe it's through because she is my youngest, the 4-year-old, is a Pisces sun, Leo moon, fiery, feelsy spirit.
My goodness.
So like when she's in her feels, like she's in her feels, the whole house knows it. And I'm like, I understand. You're in your feels. But why? And it's like, it's actually, to be honest, I think it's like it's not doing shadow work with my daughter, but it's like teaching my daughter like the basic foundations of.
And what comes up for me too as you're saying that, whether it's that or the coaching or whatever, at the end of the day it's also communicating, because in order for you to feel your feels, there needs to be that person of trust that you get to say, this is happening and maybe I can't control it, and that person reflects back, like you as a mom, like a conscious mom, saying, so this is okay, I understand that you're having this feeling, and verbally processing. That's something that I really feel strongly about. We were talking about word nerds. I love words because communication is how we also get through that, right? There's a distinction between acknowledging that you feel a certain way but then working through it. So I'm about to word nerd emotions, right? So emotions comes from Latin ex movere, which means to move out. So if you don't have the tools, like people like you and I, who are at the point where we're a little bit conscious, we've done the work, we know what it feels like, we've made the mistakes and we've worked through them. Like, so I know how to get myself through a funky spell. But someone who hasn't done that, they're going to usually need the tool of communication with another person to unravel what's in their mind that they haven't taken out before, because up until then they've just been holding it in and it's either imploding or exploding.
No, I love that. And actually, the last person I interviewed, she described it as, she's like, emotion, it's energy in motion. And and it's kind of like the same thing. It's got to go somewhere.
Mm-hmm. But what we've been conditioned is to hold it in, and that's where wounding, and where you said before, when you talked about the shadow work, like some people get stuck in the dark space because whether you're moving the energy out or you're keeping it in motion, that's not happening. It's actually it's anchoring you in the space that you don't want to be.
And for you, when you are feeling like in your low vibrational spaces, we're not talking about relaxing, so to speak. What's your go-to method of maybe raising your vibration, bringing yourself back into center, so to speak, when
Yep.
you are on those?
Connection, being connected. So it's actually a pillar of self-compassion. Self-compassion has 3 pillars. There's non-judgment, mindfulness, so like not over identifying with the problem, and the third one is shared humanity versus isolation. And when we're not feeling great, the default mode is by myself, this is my problem, no one understands who I am. So I really do feel like connection, whether it's in a moment where we're allowed to be not 6 feet apart again, or having a phone call, or being in communion with other people, I think is, for me, what raises me back to the reminder of who I am, because life is a team sport. Life is not to be done alone. And other people really being in that frequency really reminds me of what my true nature is.
I love that. I want to take a little sidetrack.
Sure.
You've done it a few times. I find it highly interesting, your work with words. I know you do like spells and things like, and I'm just interested in that because I've always loved words. Words have been my thing. When we ran out of books at my house, I read dictionaries, like and thesauruses, and like
I love that.
and a whole entire encyclopedia sets, like.
Oh my gosh, yes.
And so, like, seeing your work and how you talk about, like, the words we use with ourselves and the words we use with others and the power that we have, like, that it's something very near and dear to my heart. And with everything we are talking about, it's not, I just wanted to kind of hear about that and have you do your little tangent and share because I love it. So,
Sure. So like I can go on forever, but like the way it started is I grew up in a bilingual home. And so there were words that we used in Spanish that were not used in English. And I remember thinking like there was almost like a frequency, like I felt a certain way energetically when we used those certain word in one language versus another. And then I became a language major in college. So I actually have an undergraduate degree with a major in Spanish and Italian, a minor in Portuguese, and I took electives in French and German. I've dabbled in tons of other languages.
also, like, all the romantic languages.
Yes. And like I self-studied a little bit of Mandarin. I've traveled literally to 30 countries. And there are these moments where I would hear words or like understand words, and I'm like, oh, like that landed in a certain way. And I realized that words have frequency. And then I discovered the work of Masaru Emoto. I don't know if you've ever heard of him.
Hmm.
So he was the words in water, and how the words that we say impacted the crystal composition of water. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is why I feel a certain way about words. And so then we go into my master's and we learn about neuroplasticity, and how when our brains have a negativity bias, they are wired to protect us. And so by protecting us, it means we have to think about the worst case scenario to prepare for the worst. But when we reprogram ourselves, and how do we program ourselves in the modern world, but with through language and communication? So I was like, well, there's something here where we can use words to shift our life. And then I understood spellings. I understood like what people would pray over food. I understood the power of declaration. I also then learned in human design. I don't know if you've ever heard of human design, but the throat is a portal for manifestation. So here we go again, like our words cast spells on our lives. And then I also was reminded of the four agreements. So like in every text, whether it's science or magic or ancient history, like in the four agreements, they talk about how the Toltecs say every thought you say and every word you say is a pact with the universe, and that's what you're declaring. So I'm like, there's something here. So we get to be careful. And not only do we get to be careful with words, but we really need to understand the root of the word. Like when this word came into birth, what was the original spirit? Because language evolves, and sometimes we lose the spirit, but the spirit is somehow deep there. And when we get to the root of the word, we then can understand, oh, wow, like even though I'm using it this way, this is also the spell, the energy that I'm sending off into the universe when I'm using this particular word.
It's like when you remodel a house almost, and it's like you're stripping it back to exactly like that old wallpaper that's hiding underneath the other layers and that true nature of.
Or the original wood floors under carpet, right?
Hmm. I
And it's
love that.
magic. It's magic.
Yes, yes, no, and it's beautiful, and I love it because I very much am into using my words to bring things into existence because that's what I do. Well, oh,
A little thunderstorm.
oh, yeah.
There's something there. The universe confirmed. But like I
Yes.
wanted just to say really quick, like the biggest thing, the power I saw though was my sister had a really bad car accident this year, and she suffered a traumatic brain injury. She was intubated and not in her mind for a full 3 months. I mean 3 weeks. And I remember the first day of her accident, I'm like, we get to reprogram her brain, because people who suffer traumatic brain injury often have a lot of emotional trauma afterwards because they don't understand themselves. And so I created a series of mantras for her so that when she came back to consciousness, she can begin to program herself into the highest vibrational state possible. And it's interesting because in less than 4 months, she's been cleared to go back to work. She's been cleared to drive again. And all of her doctors say that they feel like she's a walking miracle from the scan of when she had her accident to where she is now, and that her attitude is the best that they ever seen in any patient with traumatic brain injury. And I'll never forget that while she was in the hospital, because we couldn't go because of COVID, when she was feeling low, she would call me and she would say, I need new mantras. What are the mantras? And the mantras really, they got her through the pain of the initial healing process, but then they strengthened her to carry her into believing that she can get back and faster than most people. And
That's
that's when I saw the
beautiful.
power. That's when I saw the power of words.
I love that. That's absolutely beautiful. And I feel like this might even be the one that ties into my next question, because I always like to ask about like clients or in the work that you do, something that would change your life or how you practice or what you see. And I feel like that would be the one, like literally putting those words right there into action.
Yeah. Like literally giving her words that programmed her to believe that she had the power to heal faster. They were telling her it would take her months, if not a year, to go back to work.
Wow.
They were saying 6 months to a year, and she's back at work in 3.5 months.
Wow, that's amazing. I love that. And so aside with that, like what are some of like the other like the most important usefulness, the most important thing to remember when we are like that you've learned about using your words? Like what's the biggest tip for someone else when you're trying to think about how we use our words?
Yeah,
Where would you go?
so for me, when I'm working with a client who is in their dark shadow phase, right, I get to the root of what's their biggest fear, right? Because when I don't know if you've ever heard the Course in Miracles, I'm sure you have. There are the two polarities: there's love or there's fear, right? And so fear is what disconnects us from possibility, from other people, from what we're capable of. And so we get to the root of the fear, and so I try to get a word that really helps get them into the opposite of that fear so that they can stand in the power of the vibration of love of what they're trying to create. So if they're afraid, like that they're going to lose a home, or that they're not going to, I think safety, I think when I think about like people's biggest fears, they tend to be root chakra issues like money, family, belonging, providing for ourselves. So I try to start with you are safe, because people often feel unsafe when they're in the fear state. And I also remind them that they are loved, because often fear keeps us disconnected from others, and just begin to like build upon safety, love, and then an I am statement that makes them feel what they want to create in their lives. So some people might need ambition, some people might need consistency, some people might need whatever it is, but then we build upon, but we layer those words to get them to where they need to be.
I like that. Well, before we wrap up and talk about all the fun stuff you have going on, is there anything that you'd like to share? Is there something that maybe I didn't think about asking you, or something I didn't know enough to dive in? Anything you want to add to the conversation that you think might be important?
Oh my goodness, I feel like we can go so many places. I think the most important thing is what we discussed about. Well, I think the neuroplasticity, the words, the mind, all of it, whether you look at it from a science perspective or you look at it from like this woo-woo metaphysical magical perspective, it all boils down to when you use your words and your minds consciously, you allow yourself the possibility to create in the world, and the world that you want to create too. A lot of us right now, in the world the way it is between COVID and all the social injustice that's happening. We're vibrating at a fear state and we're mentally aligning with the fear state. And I invite anyone who's listening to ask themselves if all this stuff is making them feel fearful, what would be in the best case scenario, what are words that we can put out to create solutions and possibilities to shift the direction we're going in, because together we can use our minds and our words to create a better reality than to use them to stay in the fear, which is what the news is keeping us, right? Like, this is happening, this is bad, this is scary, this is predicted. Well, you know what, but I also feel like humanity is love, and we all could work together and we all can use consciousness to create a better world, but we have to be conscious about actually feeling and thinking and speaking in that way.
Yes, actually, I say this 20 times a day to my kids. Be a part of the solution, not a part of the problem. Like, think about the solution to your problem. Like, when you're coming to me with a problem, you should be coming to me about how we're going to fix something. Do not come to me to complain.
Your
I mean,
kids are lucky they have a conscious mom, and your if your kids decide to go into a job, their future bosses are going to be really lucky to have solution creators and not just problem observers.
well, I'll be completely honest. Half of it is I don't want to hear complaining. Let's do something. Let's like,
Yeah.
like I mean, it's true, and that is why. But like in my mindset, like I can't. I'm not going to help you with your problem. But when you come to me, like this happened, how can we fix it? Like I'm upset. How can we make myself feel better? Not I hate them. All of this is broken. The day is ruined. And I'm like, are you sure about that? Can we please start thinking about the solution and not like how everything just went downhill from here? Because it will
Yeah.
very quickly, I promise you. Like,
Yeah, and they'll be change makers, and then you're actually creating a, a a a legacy in your children of possibility and not being in the shadow. Because not being in shadow isn't bad, but in order to get out of it, you have to be able to see what's possible outside of that.
yeah, or I also think like there's no possible way to be like a bright, shiny beam of light without seeing some darkness somewhere. Like,
I've had some really dark shadow experiences, like like workplace abuse and difficult experiences, and I thank those. I can now see, thank God I had those experiences, because without that I wouldn't be where I am. I really see that in retrospect, right?
mm-hmm.
So so honoring our shadows. So I love that you talk about shadow work, because those are the experiences that raise our consciousness and allow us to be of conscious contribution to the world.
Thank you. Well, if anybody is interested in getting in touch with you or if you have anything coming up, why don't you tell us about that?
Yeah, so I'm about to launch my astrology coaching program. So I'm really excited to support people with astrology and coaching, understanding their birth chart to then really create things in their world. And I do a lot of my work on Instagram, so they can find me at Alona Pamplona. That's Ilona, and Pamplona, like the city in Spain. I'm working on some other projects. I don't want to spell them out just yet because they're not confirmed. So I kind of want to wait for them to be concrete before I dilute them in words. But just keep, if you check on alonapamplona.com or Alona Pamplona at Instagram, I'll be sharing a lot of what I'm doing there.
Wonderful. Well, thank you again so much for being a part of this. I appreciate it. And hopefully, we'll be talking again soon.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
I hope you enjoyed our conversation. I would like to thank Alona again so much for speaking with me, and always thank you, Junos, for listening. I enjoyed our conversation and deep dive into words and language so much. And if you're interested in working with Alona, visit alonapamplona.com to reach her. If you want to get the latest episodes as soon as they come out, please subscribe, I would also greatly appreciate it if you could rate and review us as well. If you want to be a part of the Juno community or reach out with feedback to be a part of the show or just say hi, you can find Junos in Shadow on Facebook and Instagram at Junos in Shadow or visit junosinshadow.com. Until next time, stay strong, goddess.